Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the CHIPS Accelerator Series. We're thrilled today to have a fantastic presentation coming up on legal ops. I'm Joan Toth, and I'm the Executive Director of CHIPS, and so excited to be with you this morning. This is such an interesting topic, and when I first started learning a little bit about legal ops, I was really intrigued at how it has really the potential to very rapidly transform how companies operate their legal systems. And so I am going to turn it over to Nicole Zappian from CLOC, and she is going to introduce our fantastic speakers and our topic this morning. So Nicole, welcome and take it away.
Thank you, Joan, and thank you so much to the CHIPS team for hosting us today. If you all are not familiar with CLOC, we are a global community of experts focused on redefining the business and practice of law, and by helping legal operations professionals collaborate with each other and other industry players like law firms and tech providers, we work to help set industry standards and practices for legal ops professions. We're thrilled to be hosting this webinar today to explore the evolution of legal ops, the critical role it plays within the legal department, and key strategies the function can help to navigate changes in the legal landscape. And it's my pleasure to introduce our presenters today. Frances Pomposa is the VP of Legal Strategy and Operations and Chief of Staff to the General Counsel at Splunk, and she also serves as CLOC's Treasurer on our Board of Directors. Frances has had a distinguished career specializing in legal operations, efficiency, and scaling, having also held senior roles at Workday, Lyft, and Adobe. And Ann Trotter is the Senior Director of Operations in the Office of the General Counsel at Hearst, and she also serves on CLOC's Education Advisory Council. In her career, Ann has pioneered an operations role in legal departments at 3 Fortune 500 size companies. I know you'll enjoy your time learning from these two incredible women. They will also be engaging and responding to your questions, so please make sure to share in the chat and Q&A box. And now I'll hand it over to Frances and Ann.
Thank you, Nicole. If we just want to advance the slides, a couple to, I believe it's slide 5 with the overview.
Right.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. We were really excited about being able to participate with this particular group and the subject matter that we're going to be going over. So what we're going to be covering today, honestly, we could do probably a dissertation on. So this is a kind of like teaser. We dive into some areas and specifics, but please know that we would love to engage with people that are attending. So if you have questions, please engage. But also, there's so much more to this that we won't be able to cover, but it really is going to be focusing on what is legal operations. We're going to be going over some key concepts that really help guide general counsels or attorneys' understandings of what legal operations is through our CLOC Core 12. We're going to go over how the legal operations function, concepts, and industry has evolved, the role, its criticality, and then we're going to go over some key competencies and professional backgrounds of legal ops leaders, and then we're going to go over our experience. I also want to call out as well that we are going to be providing the deck after the session. So just in case people want to look at the slides after, that will be provided. All right, if we want to go into the next slide. So legal operations has evolved a great deal. This slide kind of goes over at its highest level what legal operations is. So legal operations handles and provides expertise in strategic planning, financial management, project management, and technology. Those are like the broadest kind of subsets. And really what they're meant to do is allow legal professionals to focus on providing legal advice, which is a concept where we really double down on having the right people do the right work and having your department optimized at the foundational level to enable that moving forward. Professionals with this background can specialize in legal, finance, marketing, data analytics, learning, There's so much more. So it's when you hear legal operations as kind of a sweeping topic, there's a lot of nuances and areas of specialization that go into it. Capabilities really help supplement kind of a number of different areas, including things that are very relevant to general counsels and emerging general counsels or people that are building legal departments. So managing risks, monitoring, compliance areas, incorporating compliance, tools, tech, processes that ultimately allows you to deliver more value to the business by making sure that it's set up correctly and functioning the way that it needs to. We also, it's centered on being proactive. So one of the things that we wanted to focus on because of the audience and the subject matter of this kind of
I've never seen somebody have such a big jump too. I've never seen.
Because of the course, one of the areas that we really wanted to focus on is why does this matter to you in this audience? Okay, so that's kind of the overview. And again, we're really focusing on why is this important to you in this particular audience. So Anne and I have put together some content and talking points that are centered around exactly what is the impact that legal operations can provide to the general counsel or the office of the general counsel. And if you want to move to the next slide. So what we did here is no general counsel role is truly structured the same. What they're focusing on and kind of the remit of the role, the complexity of the role is going to be dependent on the macro environment, the stage that the company is at, the stage of maturity with the legal department itself. Are they the first attorney? Has the company been around for a long time? Are they taking things over? But this is just a very high level sampling of all of the things that a modern general counsel, which is really important, could potentially be responsible for. And obviously the goal is to have, as a general counsel, to manage others. So then you're managing the strategy at the highest level and working with experts. But if you're just the first GC coming in, this is kind of a menu of the things you could be dealing with on a daily basis. And if you go to the next slide, legal operations, and especially having a legal operations professional at the kind of foundational level when you're going in and building up a legal department or at any stage of a company can really allow the general counsel to focus on and elevate what is truly the most impactful and critical in their role. Because what you'll see in that previous slide is there's so many things on there, and there is no way in the world that anyone, even if they have like the most amazing background in the world, is going to be an expert in all of those areas. So if you go to the next slide, what we've kind of outlined is a sampling of like what legal operations can help with right off the bat. And you'll see with a lot of those areas, a lot of the things that legal operations can help with are the things that attorneys are not taught in law school, that you don't get experience in till you're kind of on the ground running. A lot of these areas that legal operations can help with are operations, tools, tech related. We'll get into kind of the overall remit, but you can automatically see that having a skilled legal operations professional can take so much noise out of such an overwhelming scope of role. And I think that's a really great way to kind of say with a couple of slides, like the impact right off the bat of like what legal operations can potentially do for a legal organization and a general counsel. And you can move to the next slide. I will hand it over to Anne here.
So we've seen from those previous slides, thank you, Frances, for setting it up so clearly how complex the modern general counsel job can be. And the scope is very broad and cannot be managed by a single person, but it wasn't always that way. So if we can go to the next slide, Nicole, I want to take a few moments to talk about the past and how we got to where we are at present. So pre-1990, in the 1980s, most companies didn't have general counsel, believe it or not. They relied on a trusted outside firm, and either a partner with that firm or a firm team would handle the role that is now held by the general counsel. But increasingly, with the complexity of company work and with the costs increasing at law firms, companies began to hire their first internal attorney who became the general counsel. And some of the pioneers in this space were DuPont, GE, a lot of the banks in New York. And many of these people, when they came in, quickly realized that there was a lot of work that they could manage in-house more efficiently and with more inside knowledge of the company and the company relationships than they could by farming it out. So the in-house departments began to grow. And as they grew, the general counsel often found they needed a deputy to help them handle the level of work and the growth of the company legal function. So many of the early legal operations professionals were attorneys. When you look back, a number of them were M&A attorneys for some reason, but they also came from other practice groups. And they were trying to handle legal operations in addition to their day jobs, which may have been getting deals closed or managing large litigation or a growing IP portfolio. And that's where we were in the 1990s. By the late 90s and mid 2000s, more Fortune 400 companies were bringing in legal operations professionals. Coming out of the 1991 to 93 recession, costs were increasingly a concern, and companies were trying to manage their legal costs and doing that by bringing more of the work in-house. And as they did that, and the portfolio started to grow, so did the mandate of the general counsel and their deputy. They were starting to manage larger teams in-house. And plus, there were, as noted on the slide, there were a lot of international issues as the regulatory environment was growing more complex. So by the mid 2000s and leading up to 2019, over 85% of Fortune 400 companies now had a legal operations professional who was acting as the right hand to the general counsel in managing the work of the department that was not strictly the practice of law, but making sure that all of the clients were covered, that the processes were efficient, and that the costs were being handled appropriately. And as it wasn't just the Fortune 400 at this point, of course, but increasingly new companies, venture-backed companies in Silicon Valley and other places realized, hey, we're not in the business of the practice of law. You know, we're not a Thomson Reuters or a LexisNexis. We don't want to build these large law departments of established companies. We need to find a way to be innovative and handle this differently. So they were also handling legal operations professionals early on to help them think through the strategy of how were they going to staff and build out the legal function. And that brings us to today, where we've established a baseline of what legal operations can accomplish, but with new emerging technologies, particularly in generative AI, the pace of innovation has increased, and increasingly companies have a legal operations professional who is helping them scope the environment of what's emerging, forecast what's coming next, and make sure that they're ready to take on those new challenges that come up. We could go to the next slide, Nicole. So this echoes the previous slide, but also focuses on a typical evolution of legal operations within a single company. So often when a legal operations professional is hired, they're there to optimize. There's often a focus on cost and on mapping the current processes to understand how work is practiced and what can be done to optimize how it's delivered. And then as that trust and relationship grows, it's often focused on partnering with the attorneys and with the general counsel to deliver work directly to the clients and develops a more business client focused role. And then in phase 3, we often see that legal departments are one of the only core departments that have good knowledge of every line of business within the company and a relationship with all the service departments. And that provides a unique perspective that serves the CEO and the members of the C-suite. And you often find that the legal department, with legal operations helping with the business language and terminology, to partner with the C-suite on the strategic business of a company. And we can go to slide 14. All right, so all of this to say is that from 1980, where the first general counsel were hired primarily to manage the work of the outside counsel firm, to now managing the process for the most part internally, reaching out to law firms and other legal service providers as needed in a strategic and targeted way to manage the risks of the company and drive revenue, is a huge change in the expectation for general counsels, but also positions them to becoming chief legal officers and even putting them in the line for the C-suite. So we can go to the next slide. So this speaks to what I was just saying, right? That the modern general counsel role has evolved tremendously. And in addition to this great quote on screen, you'll find in our notes another quote that I just love from Atul Gawande, who is the author of the Checklist Manifesto, where he talks about professions from Air Force pilots to tech-assisted surgeons, from lawyers to financial managers. And he observes that the work has become far too complex for one person to carry out from memory alone. He says that multiple fields have become too much airplane for one person to fly. And that's why the general counsel needs a flight crew. And that flight crew consists of both lawyers and legal ops professionals. Francis, is there anything you'd like to add before you go on?
No, just to iterate, I think having Anne's kind of walkthrough of the evolution, but also the importance of legal operations to making a general counsel successful, but also setting up their department in a way that allows them to thrive and deal with any changes or what's thrown at them across the board is really important. You did a great job of illustrating all of that, Anne. Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to provide another layer of context, really, which is our CLOC Core 12. So this is a really amazing resource. We're going to link out to it in the resources and can provide it after the fact as well. But legal operations can be such a broad kind of subject matter area that it's very helpful to kind of have a guidepost for what that means. Our CLOC Core 12 really allows you to see at a glance kind of the different components that can go into the legal operations remit and role and department. It's important to call out that it's not one size fits all. We'll get into some of the nuances here, but it really is, if you're looking for seeing what could be and kind of the art of the possible with legal operations, this is a great place to start. So if you want to go to the next slide. So some of the areas, and I'm just going to go over these at a high level because we have the definitions in here, but of the Core 12, there's a number of key distinct components. So there's business intelligence, obviously about organizing, analyzing, collecting, and revealing insights to inform, create, and share data-driven decisions and to create narratives for the legal team. There's financial management, which allows teams, depending on their level of expertise or the needs of the company or the department, you can have someone on the legal operations team typically manage the budget, headcount, resources that are allocated around there. Firm and vendor management, so relationships with law firms, vendors, and ensure that the way that the engagements are designed are just very tight processes that are repeatable, compliance related, and allow you to, again, glean data and insights. Next slide. So information governance and knowledge management are all around making sure that for a legal department, they have kind of a method to the madness right off the bat with all tools, technology, processes, at a foundational level that creates best practices for creating, organizing, securing, retrieving, and disposing of matter-related information. This is key, obviously, because it is a legal department. So this is areas where it is particularly relevant, but also because it's operations related, making sure that it's done in a way that is business-friendly, client-friendly, and scalable. Knowledge management is about the structures and mechanisms, tools, to make it easy for people and teams to collaborate on data, but also have kind of a data set or knowledge share together to ensure that you're not repeating and reinventing the wheel, that you can learn from the information and just make sure information is shared effectively. Organization optimization and health. This is an area where, again, it's not one size fits all, but really partnering with the general counsel early on talent, rewards, org design, org health, DEIB, enrichment, recognition, training. Those are all things internally focused for the add value to. Next slide. Practice operations. So this has to do with the governance alignment, kind of change management that allows people to be as efficient and kind of optimized as possible within a legal operations or within a legal department. This has to do with like logistic, legal service offerings, org structure, allocation, and resources to ensure that the distribution of resources is appropriately leveled and achieves the appropriate kind of end goal for legal matters. So it's really looking at the how work gets done. Project and program management. This is an area that I think doesn't get as much credibility as it should, but adds a ton of value right off the bat to legal operations and legal departments. And Anne is going to get into this a little bit later in the deck. But this has to do with making sure that legal teams plan, coordinate, and oversee initiatives and matters from start to finish. Some companies have centralized project management teams at their kind of corporate level, which are great, but they're also not all companies have those. And there's a lot of nuances to legal departments with the subject matter areas, roles, and it really infuses so much productivity and value quickly to have project and program managers within legal departments embedded that are dedicated to servicing those key legal projects and programs. Service delivery models has to do with matching like the nature of the work with the risk level to ensure that it is performed with like the appropriate level of resources to deliver the best legal product or service. So if you look at like centers of excellence or different ways to kind of scale work types that are repeatable, this is a really great component that adds a ton of value to legal departments as well. Next slide. Strategic planning. So as the role of general counsels has evolved, they really are business partners and advisors, but also a part of the operational structure of the company. So when you look at company like objectives, priorities, legal has to map to those as well. So when it comes to strategic planning and making sure that at the end of the year, you're completing what you intended to complete, that you are clear with your team about what the priorities are. Strategic planning plays such a key piece in that, and legal operations adds a ton of value to that area. Technology. So legal operations tools and tech, it can be an overwhelming environment, and it's really important that if you are investing in technology, that you do it correctly. The worst thing that you can do right off the bat is just implement a ton of technology that costs a lot of money and isn't implemented well or not understood, and you don't invest in the right change management. Having legal operations be able to come in and thoughtfully implement and deploy technology in a scalable way really elevates legal departments very quickly. Training and development is important in any department, and legal operations can manage this as well. So this can be internal facing. So to your legal department itself, what are we doing to create content, provide education, growth opportunities, coaching and teaching to your department itself, or it can be legal training and development for the greater company. That's an area that's managed as well. Next slide. And this also adds on another layer. So it's very easy to look at the CLOC Core 12 and just be like, okay, I'm going to use this as a checklist. Please do not. Because you will, one, go insane. The person that you hire to do legal operations will go insane. But also there's various levels of kind of complexity and growth that go along with this. And that's part of the reason what makes it so great is there truly is not an end to, it's not a check the box, I have legal ops, I'm done. It's constantly iterating, evolving, and taking those areas to the next level to match the macro environment, the environment at the company, and then the organizational maturity. And I'm going to hand it over to Anne. Again, this area with project management is an area that I don't think a ton of attorneys get enough information on. So we're really excited to have Anne kind of dive into this particular area in the Core 12.
Thank you, Francis. And before I dive in, let's just pause for a moment to look at this CLOC Core 12. After hearing everything Francis had to say, I know it can sound daunting because that's a lot of information across a number of subject matters. And no one coming in has expertise in all 12 of them, and that's never expected. You usually set your flag with 2 or 3, and then you build out your knowledge of the rest, partnering with business partners, colleagues you meet in professional organizations like CLOC, and with various service providers. And we'll go into that a little more when we talk about our current experience later in the deck. But for now, we want to focus on legal project management, and we could do a whole college course on this. And in fact, the CLOC created a working group a couple of years ago that brought law firms, law departments, and other legal service providers, including legal consultants, together to develop a body of knowledge around a legal project management framework that was focusing on how do you identify a matter, bring it into your work stream, how is the work managed, documented, and resolved to make sure that it happens in an efficient and productive way. I was really struck recently at a presentation by the working group. One of the members is a guy named David Ruff, who is a partner at Baker Donaldson. And he talked about how, as an attorney, he took the initiative to go out and get PMI certified, which is maybe the top project management certification in the market. And by doing that and bringing some of these processes back to this firm, they were able to reduce matter cost by 40% and the time to close to 60%. That's an enormous savings. And with enormous portfolios of work that companies are handling and the inability to just endlessly add people to the pile to help manage it, taking a rigorous approach to managing your legal projects is critical. And we can go to our next slide. And so here we picked one example of a document one can use. And this is one that I use at Hearst quite a bit in assessing our projects for intake, because I have a small team, we're 4 people, and we can't do everything that's brought to us all at once. So we have to assess what we're going to do. So if we start in the lower left quadrant, that's easy, right? If something is very low risk to you and the company, and there's not a lot of reward in doing it, it might just be one of those tasks that you just go and get it done to get it off your plate. But when you're looking at the efforts where you're going to have to invest more time and resources, you really need to assess what you're going to take on and what you're going to backlog for future consideration. And the easiest, obviously, are the things that if it's low risk to the company and to your team, but it's going to give you a high reward, that's usually going to put the project at the front of the line. A good example of that might be during the pandemic, if you didn't have e-signatures already. E-signatures is something that you can do fairly quickly. It doesn't require a lot of time-intensive resources, and the reward is going to be immediate because your company is going to be back in business of being able to sign contracts and get revenue across the finish line. If it's high risk and high reward, it's probably something you also want to take on, but you don't want to rush it. You need to do your research. You need to make sure you have all of your resources aligned and ready to take on the work before proceeding, to make sure that when you get it done right. And then finally, sometimes there are things where there's a lot of risk involved to the company, and maybe the reward in terms of revenue or optimization isn't that great. And so then you put that in your back pocket and you weigh on it more until the dynamic changes, and then you can take it forward. But this is the way we have 40 projects a year in a team of 4 people. So this is how we assess what comes across our transom and how we're going to handle it. Next slide. Oh, so I'm going to turn it back over to Francis to talk about scoping legal operations, because we were talking about right resourcing. So that's our segue.
Thanks, Ann. So again, what we're trying to do here is really give you a sampling of some key areas to make sure that you have enough information, at least as a starting point, when you hear about legal operations or start thinking, hopefully, about scoping that role for your team. So next slide. So one thing we really want to focus on is like that there's various backgrounds when it comes to legal operations professionals. It's obviously going to depend on the particular role and leveling associated with it, but it can be a combination of professional experience on the field. So it doesn't necessarily require an advanced degree, but you'll often see that, especially in the more senior roles, that is helpful. You'll see legal operations professionals that have a combination, again, of on-the-ground experience, but also formal educational backgrounds that can range from JDs, JD MBAs. They could have backgrounds in finance and accounting with their CPA, or they can have kind of IT advanced degrees. We're also seeing more people that have like data science degrees, which is great too. But it is a wide variety. There's a wide variety of approaches that people can go in, which I think is amazing. It's a very inclusive environment. And it's important just to lay the groundwork that it's not going to be like a check the box when you create a job description for someone that they have one particular type of educational background. That is not the way to go about doing it.
Francis, if I could just add there, that's typical. The advanced degree is typical of the person who's heading up your function, but there are a lot of people who come from paralegal backgrounds or other support backgrounds, particularly in the areas of discovery and IP, who lateral into a legal operations role and really focus in on that experience to grow their career in legal operations.
Thanks, Ann, and that's really true. You'll see that a lot in talking to people, that they come in and kind of specialize in one area of the Core 12 and then iterate and build off of there. Again, when you're scoping out the role, it really needs to be based on company stage, department maturity level, the company priorities, and gaps in expertise for the general counsel or the department overall. The leveling itself can range from an analyst to an SVP. So it is a full career ladder, which is amazing for people because you can start off in that field and kind of go to the highest levels in a legal department. I will also say, though, that one thing that's really easy to do is it's great to knowledge share and collaborate to say, okay, what have you done when you talk to your peers? But again, it's very easy to just throw out there like, oh, I'm going to hire a legal operations manager, and I'm going to assume that they'll just handle everything in the CLOC Core 12. Leveling is so important with the success there, because if you have someone that is more junior in career, that's not a problem, but you need to go in with realistic expectations there. So just to call out that the leveling and the range is a full career ladder, and it should be based on what the company and department needs, and what it needs in the future. Next slide. I think it's also really important to call out some of the competencies at a really high level, just from like a person perspective, for those people that are leading. So this wouldn't be someone that is an analyst that is focused on like e-billing. If they have these competencies, that's amazing. But you really want to have someone that is results driven. So focused in on translating strategies into action. Their ownership is important in driving from start to completion. Change oriented. So change management is an area that we can't really dive into because we don't have enough time. But if you're thinking about key skills, change management and understanding how to take people along a journey and ensure that changes happen, even if they are hard for people, in a consumable and customer service oriented way, really has a ton of impact and value. Someone that's collaborative, a leader, and makes sound decisions, because again, this person hopefully will be a part of the leadership team, and a direct report to the general counsel. So having someone that is an extension, that acts with integrity, sound judgment, that's very important. And now I'm going to hand it over to Anne to talk about her unique experience in legal operations at Hearst.
So we've been talking about it in the abstract, and we thought it would be helpful to give you a bit of a deep dive so you can understand some of the applicability of what we've been talking about. So if we could have the next slide, Nicole. So we've been hammering home that every legal operations job is different. And in my case, I've founded legal operations function at 3 different Fortune 400 size companies. And what I've brought to each role has indeed been very different. And just for level setting and to help people think about their own positioning, I was not in legal before I went to Viacom CBS in my first legal operations role. I had a background in legal. I had worked in law firms and as a law librarian, as a law firm conference room receptionist, but primarily what I was bringing to the table is my father had been an M&A attorney and a managing partner at several law firms who believed firmly that the business of law was going to be transformed in the 21st century by legal operations professionals partnering with general counsel. So he was a great sales guy, he's a great rainmaker. So he talked me into leaving my job in human capital management. And after I finished my MBA, I landed a job at Viacom CBS, and my focus there was financial because the company was at the time involved in a very serious litigation with another company that was one of those bet the company litigations, and money was flying out the door. And I was brought in to bring some discipline and rigor both to that case and to their spending as a whole. There was a lot of friction with the CFO. So a lot of my meetings were with the general counsel and the CFO to talk about how legal spending was managed. And we utterly transformed the process. So when I went in, there were some fights. There was a argument where I ducked under the table at an early meeting. But by the time I left, they had brought in a management consulting firm to look at financial projects across the company. And they said that we were managed so well at about 24% below companies a similar size that there was nothing for us to do, and we were in their backlog, and they were going to focus on other aspects of the company that were an issue. When I moved to Harman, Harman is a products company. You may know them because of JBL or Harman Sound, but they also do a lot on informatics in cars. They're in 25% of cars on the highways around the world today. And they really wanted me to focus on two things, compliance and integrations of new companies. And so I was focused a lot on what are our supplier due diligence processes, what are our sourcing issues, are we looking at how that our resources are duly employed and not under slave labor conditions? What about conflict minerals? Are those integrated into our products? So I worked a lot with the procurement and the product development teams, developing sound processes to help them move that forward. And then when I came into Hearst, at Hearst, their deputy general counsel had been managing legal operations because he had a computer science degree, of course, and so he would do all the technology stuff. But he was also a practicing litigator appearing in court, and he needed to focus on his day job. So they brought me in to take a look at their technology stack and make recommendations about how we could right size our technology and take work that was more ministerial or repetitive off of the plate of the lawyers so that they could focus at their at their highest level and what they were trained to do. So we've done everything from implementing basic systems like document management and matter management to chatbots and generative AI tools. And along with that, we've also focused a lot on training. So we've developed learning journeys to help someone when they come on board come up to speed on the various tools available to them and how to optimize their use of them, and also how you can grow and develop. So, it starts with technology, but it's not all about technology. It's also strategy. It's also human capital development and training. So you start with one focus and then you broaden out from there. Next slide, as I'm going on too long. So this is to give you an example of how we structure our work. At the top of the house, you'll see our department mission, which is what our legal department as a whole is focused on. And then the operations mission on the left, and you'll get the deck later so you can read through it. But the operations mission is acting in support of the department mission, which in turn is tied to the company mission, so that we can really help people understand the value that we provide. We also provide an identity statement about how we are going to work with you as a collaborative business partner focused on continuous improvement and providing actionable metrics to inform our decisions. And then we tell them what our key capabilities are, which help us explain both what we do and how we can contribute to their work, but also what we probably cannot do and what we might need to hand off to someone else. So with that, I'll hand it over to Frances to talk about her experience.
Thanks, Anne. You can go to the next slide. So this is just a high-level overview of kind of the mission of Splunk's LGA strategy and operations team, and then the areas that we support. I'll get into kind of the experience at other companies and focus areas, but with Splunk in particular, I was really lucky to come into a legal operations team and a legal team overall that had been built out and was actually fairly advanced when it comes to the level of maturity. So I was brought in to really take the team to the next level, but also we don't get into this in this presentation, but I also act as chief of staff to the general counsel, which is another component that can be a portion of a legal operations team leader. It's not always. But my team has been focused on enabling efficient, focused, and data-driven delivery of strategic services that protect and position Splunk overall as a company for success. We focus obviously on operational excellence, evolution, scale across people, process, technology, and solutions. My team or myself are responsible for department strategy and comms, financial management for the department, outside counsel and vendor management, tools, technology, automation, resource allocation and org design, learning and development, change management and process improvement, and business intelligence. So again, this is just a sampling of what my focus has been at Splunk. If you go to the next slide, I can kind of layer on to what Anne shared. So again, the focus and kind of progression and leveling of various roles is dependent on like the company's maturity stage, what's going on and what they're trying to accomplish. So with Adobe, that's where I came in and started my career. I was really lucky to come in under Lisa Connie, who was one of the founders of CLOC, actually. And I, to Anne's point earlier, I actually started out as an IP paralegal. So I was doing source code audits for product teams and advising on EULA's source code reviews, matching product licenses to code, working really closely with a lot of the really great engineers at Adobe. And like any legal operations focus, process tech, tool technology was a really big component of that, and I loved that. So I was able to build out my career there. Again, that team had been around for some time, the legal operations team and the legal team. So it was a mature legal operations group when it comes from leveling. And my focus when I was there was really on knowledge management, process improvement, and change management. So again, Adobe, tech-focused software at the time where I was there. And it was really about creating scalable and modern processes that would allow the department to scale and create a really good user experience and kind of collaboration experience for employees at Adobe. Lyft, I came in and it was a net new function and role. So legal operations was not there before. I was focused on building out kind of that function. We focused on foundational level areas and implementing processes and technology. So again, when I came into Lyft, they were pre-IPO. The legal team there was very small but mighty. And we were coming in and making sure that legal had a seat at the table in conversation. So it's very easy when you have more foundational teams or companies that are emerging where legal can only be included in conversations where they're kind of deemed necessary. So when it comes to like tooling, technology, procurement, you want to make sure that you're coming in and ensuring that legal owns the relationship with outside counsel, not procurement. You're coming in and acquiring tools and making sure that the tools that procurement may be implementing work for legal. We implemented contract lifecycle management there, e-billing, matter management, and it was really focused on foundational level areas. Workday, I was there to, again, build out legal operations. That role had not existed before. And it was, again, focused on foundation, implementing processes and technology. The nuance there is Workday had been around for a little bit longer from a maturity perspective. So it was cleaning up, rebuilding, and change management in addition to implementing foundational level areas. And then with Splunk, again, a more mature legal operations team. I was brought in to really evolve the team, and the company has gone through an acquisition. So we were basically we needed to lay the groundwork, and I was responsible for integration, all of those areas when it comes to our integrations of the two companies for our legal department. And it was focusing on maturity through automation, data, and customer experience. So that's an area where we can't get into the weeds on it, but making sure that you're taking into account the end-to-end customer experience and being thoughtful about customer service, which seems so simplistic, but the experience that people have working with the legal department is important, because if it sucks, they won't include you. So by creating an experience that is positive and feedback oriented at like the most baseline level really does allow you to elevate the brand and delivery of legal services. We can go to the next slide. So I'll go through this really quickly, but one of the areas we want to kind of close off with is that legal operations is not done iterating. So there's this concept of like legal ops 3.0, where the first stages were really around trying to fight for like relevance and recognition to say that this is an area and a career framework. We're kind of at the point now with 2.0 where that's there, but we really want to take it to the next level. And when we talk about that next slide, it's really focused on a couple components. So you're going to see from a focus and trends perspective, and I'm sure you're seeing this within your own companies or just in the market, that the focus is going to be really on technology, data, and the ability to craft impactful messages and narratives with that data. So just like any company, the legal department has to be able to do that for their department. And this really allows them to evolve, to be strategic. And if departments are built in this manner now, they will be able to thrive. Next slide. So the reason why we say this to all of you is it really is important to think about when you are going into roles or thinking about your role as maybe like an attorney or general counsel or a general counsel in the future. Technology needs to be centered in everything. So allocating resources, agency, and priority, no one has the ability to shy away from technology. You have to be technologists and understand, mess around with the tools, because if you don't have the technology, you won't have the headcount because budgets are tight. So to be able to optimize, you have to be able to supplement your teams with technology. Next slide. The next component of this is data. So basically you have the tech, you need to do something with the outputs to make sure that you are constantly iterating, listening, and that you can make data-driven decisions. When your general counsels are going in to speak with the CEO or the CEO, which is their audience, they need data. It can't just be, I have a feeling that we need more headcount, or I have a feeling that litigation is going to be expensive. It has to be data-driven. So if we want to go to the next slide. And then again, technology and data really are the components to fuel the engine, which is ultimately storytelling. So this is kind of a nuanced way to think about it, but really the way that you get things done in legal operations and general counsels are able to execute on things is storytelling, because it takes abstract thoughts, concepts, ideas, and makes it impactful and relevant and puts it in a business framework. And that's where we can immediately unlock potential. Next slide. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Anne to go over key takeaways.
So let's go to the next slide. So we talked about CLOC and the framework and the maturity model around legal operations, and how legal operations has evolved in tandem with the evolution of the role in general counsel. And in particular, how the legal operations person can be the wing person to the general counsel in achieving the strategy and goals for the department, which is too complex for one person to manage by themselves. We've talked about how legal operations teams come in all shapes and sizes and emphasize different skill sets within those 12 core responsibilities. And then we touched on briefly, because we're running out of time, some of the thinking on where legal operations 3.0 is headed. Now, beyond this, we also have, we can go to the thank you slide, which I think is next, Nicole, and Q&A. We do have some supplementary materials in the deck, which you will receive after this call. We have more information on CLOC, which has a lot of resources behind the membership wall. We also have some information on staffing the legal operations role in more detail at different levels, getting the leveling right, and a small appendix on change management, which you've heard throughout is an essential characteristic of the legal operations, is helping manage the legal department through change. Y'all have been very quiet in the chat. Are there questions people would like to ask? I can't believe that there's no questions. Y'all have to have some, in legal operations, we're all friends, where it's a really close family-based community where we share thoughts on our minds all the time and get feedback. So we're not used to quiet. If you've got a burning question or something didn't make sense to you, feel free to speak up.
we also are happy if helpful, if I can at least offer up myself, and I think Anne's comfortable with it too, if people want to reach out to us on LinkedIn or ask questions after, we're more than happy to connect there. But again, we would encourage people, if you do have questions, we're all ears.
Well, this has been so incredibly informative. I think this is just one of the most information dense presentations that we have had, and I think that everybody is just soaking it all in. What a great presentation. Francis and Anne, thank you so much. We can't thank you and CLOC enough for presenting this information to us today. And it's really evident that CLOC just does a huge amount of work for the legal industry, and it's greatly appreciated. And I did see a couple of new messages come in. So we do have a question from Lavette. I'm new to legal ops with a brand new GC at my company. What steps can I take to buy in on the legal ops initiatives I'd like to move forward? That's a really good one.
I'll start off on that. What I do when I first come in is I take a listening tour. I knock on people's doors and introduce myself, and I ask them what they have in mind for a legal operations role. If they don't have ideas, I share with them some of what I could do based on the CLOC Core 12. And then once I have that feedback, I sit down with the general counsel and say, I've been talking to people and this is what I'm hearing. And usually I'll follow up with either focus groups or a survey to try to narrow down the focus into a few key initiatives. But I would also encourage you to find something that's relatively straightforward to do, where you can get a quick win and build a little trust and understanding of what your value proposition is. And that will make it much easier for you to take on more controversial or complex projects down the road.
I can chime in too. Nice to meet you, Lavette. And we feel for you. We're here in this journey with you. We've been there. So one thing that's really useful too, and we talked about it again very lightly, but change management. So this is going to be your best friend. If you start using this as a framework now, it will make your life a whole lot easier. But some key things to think about are, there's really two types of organizational changes. There's adaptive changes, there's small incremental, and then there's transformational changes, which are like very large scale mega initiatives. Depending on the type, there's 5 steps that you can kind of follow as a framework. If you do that, it not only allows you to build your brand in a thoughtful way, but it's very operational related. It allows you to have consistency, but you want to make sure that you're kind of taking those people that you're trying to sell along that journey. So doing that same process with your general counsel is going to be key, but also framing it in a way where if you take the department and the company's OKRs, priorities, or goals, connect what you're trying to do directly to that right off the bat, and tell them what is in it for them immediately. And if you can't do that, wait to talk to them. But those kind of guiding principles really help allowing you to execute quickly.
Storytelling to bring them along the journey with you is number one in change management. So you'll see a lot of emphasis on communications and ensuring you're transparent and keeping people alongside you on that journey.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Francis and Nicole. Thank you for being here and for that presentation. And hopefully, I think that we all learned a lot, and thank you for the roadmap of how we can proceed further.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Our pleasure. Have a great day, everybody.
You too.
Bye-bye.